And welcome back to How to Connect with Humans. This is Series 3, Episode 2. How are you, Wayne?
Good, how are you?
You're okay?
Yeah, good, thank
it's lovely to have you here.
You too.
Yeah. So, our guest this evening.
Such an incredible, loving, warm, caring individual. What can we say about Carol?
It's Carol Boroughs, and Carol Boroughs is how it all started for us. We mentioned it last week as well. We did our first training at the Insight Space, which Carol Boroughs and Ian Watson ran together. So Ian was with us last week, and it's so beautiful to start this series with people that we heard this understanding for the first time. And we were saying to Carol that particularly because I did the training a bit before Wayne did it, I used to look at Ian and Carol talking at the front of a room, and it was such a beautiful feeling. And it was something like this. It was just sort of like it was a safe space. It was a place where all sat around and we talk about this understanding, and they have this beautiful presence together. And I used to think, I want to do that. I want to do that. And 7 years later, we're pinching ourselves, trying to understand how come that we are both together running the series, and we can have this beautiful gift of having Carol with us. Carol, good evening. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. That's such a beautiful introduction. It's really quite special to be here. Having met you when you were just starting out on your journey into this beautiful understanding, and to now see this absolutely incredible series, or 3 series now that you've created, is really beautiful. And so thank you for inviting me, and thank you to everyone who's on the call for being here. When you first invited me and said, well, what did I want to talk about? The thing that came to mind was love. And it was you guys that inspired that thought, because when I look at you and I see the love that you have for each other, and I see how that really, really shines out of you, and that's very inspiring. And it's very special. And I think that even the creation of this series and how you've so freely given your time and invited all these wonderful speakers, that's an act of love as well, isn't it? And I think what you've created is very, very, very lovely. So, yeah, what can I say? I think I called it the barriers of love, didn't I? Because
you discovering the barriers
to love.
That's
right.
Yeah. So when I started to think about that, what came to mind was this quotation that you see everywhere, actually, and it's most frequently attributed to Rumi, the poet, the 13th century mystic and poet. And the quote is this: "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you've built against it." And that speaks to me very deeply. If you Google that quote, you'll find it everywhere. You'll find it on t-shirts, you'll find it on mugs. So it obviously speaks to a lot of people. And people have written all sorts of things in popular psychology and what have you about finding these barriers to love. And we're getting treated to uncover all the things that we do to stop ourselves feeling love. And often that means delving back into our past and finding out what it was that happened to us that prevents us from feeling love, and the things that we might have been hurt by when we were younger. But actually there's a much deeper meaning than that. And I think this understanding of the three principles helps us to uncover that and find out what's really going on. And it's pointing us in a very different direction. It's pointing us to understand that actually love is our true nature, that it's within us all. And one of the most powerful things about the three principles understanding is it helps us to see that the only thing that creates a barrier between us and any other person, between us and our understanding of our true nature, of actually being connected with that, is the power of thought. So we don't need to go looking for all those individual barriers, the thought content that we perpetually create. All we have to do is realize something about the nature, our own true nature, as literally being love, and seeing that it's only ever the power of thought that separates us from another human being. And as we start to realize thought and see its role in creating this separation between us, we start to see the barriers, our own personal barriers that we've created. And we start to appreciate that when we settle down into a quiet mind, we experience more love. So Carolina, we met maybe 7-8 years ago now. And we were talking just before the call started about your response when you first met me. And it's a really beautiful example of what I'm just pointing to, that actually our thought can get in the way of seeing somebody for who they really are and experiencing the love that's already within ourselves. So do you want to say something about that, Carolina? What your experience is?
I think also because when I wrote a testimonial for your website, I think, and then I thought, well, I would really like to be honest about how I feel about Carol, because how my perception changed. And I signed up for the practitioners training with Ian Watson, as far as I knew. And then I turn up on the first day, and there is Ian, and then on that table next to him, or wherever it was Carol, and they were introducing themselves, and we're going to run the course, and I got really cross, because I thought, nobody told me about this. This was a course with Ian Watson. What is she doing here? And I have a bit of a, this is not what I expected, and probably I was like, just like engaging horns and of ego, and who is she, and I don't know her, and obviously that changed, because once Carol starts talking, and you give yourself the opportunity of seeing Carol without any of your thinking. I think that's what we're pointing at. My preconceptions and what I felt at that point. Then I gave myself the opportunity of seeing you.
Yeah. That's it. And that's such a beautiful example of how this is always in play. That actually the only thing that ever becomes a barrier to us feeling love is thought in the moment, our judgments, our preconceptions, our ideas about people. And the deeper we see the nature of that, the role of thought in that, there's something incredibly helpful about that understanding in that relationship with other people, because if we are truly only ever experiencing that thought in the moment, we don't need to really work on the content or know what the content is or do anything with that. But we can know that the potential exists for that thought to change. Thought's always changing, constantly. It's never fixed. So whatever we're feeling about any given person, if it's not love, we can know for sure that we just have some ideas about them that almost certainly aren't true. And the more we allow ourselves to be open to that idea that the potential for us to feel love for anybody is there, the more we get to experience that. Because truly, when we feel love, we're feeling our own true nature. The feeling of love is a remembrance of who we are. It's an act of recognition. Sydney Banks points over and over again to our true nature literally being love. He says, divine mind is pure love. Divine consciousness is pure love. Divine thought is pure love. That's literally our true nature. And when we're feeling love, it's always coming from within. That's what the Rumi quote is pointing us to. It's what Sydney Banks points us to. That it's literally who we are. And we're remembering that when we feel love. So the potential exists for us to experience that in any given moment with any person that's in front of us. And that's a beautiful thing to know. It doesn't mean to say we're always going to feel that. We don't. Yeah. But the potential exists for that. And it's when we allow our judgments and our thinking to drop away that we get to experience it. And even with people that we've known for a very long time, you know, our loved ones, people in our family, our friends, there's always the potential for us to see something we haven't seen before. When we uncover those barriers, those thought barriers that we've created, for them to drop away. And I know that the more deeply I've gone into the principles understanding, the more I've seen the role of thought. I've had this repeated experience over and over again of falling in love with people, falling in love with the world. Yeah, over and over again. I remember one of the very first times I experienced a spontaneous arising of this feeling was I was going to collect my daughter from school, and there was this young child walking in front of me, and I can still see her now. She had these red ringlets and they were shining in the sun. And first of all, there was this recognition of something beautiful. And then it was this filling of my heart with love, as though she was my own child. And that's a repeated experience, and it happens when we drop out of our thinking and we get quiet. That's something that's incredibly helpful in any relationship where we feel like we're up against something, where we're not in connection with someone, where we're not feeling in a good place in that relationship, because we start to open our minds and our hearts to the possibility of something different. And even in a relationship where you think you know somebody really well, there's always something fresh to see. And that starts by just, as much as we can, letting go of all our preconceived ideas about that person and getting present with them and listening. not listening to our own thoughts about them, but truly listening and being present with that person. And we can find a level of connection that wasn't there previously. I had a beautiful example of that a few years ago with my own father. In my narrative about my dad, who I wasn't particularly close to, he was the logical, the engineer, non-spiritual person. My mum was the spiritual person. She was the one that I had much more in common with. And my father phoned me one evening to tell me that my granddad had died and that he'd been with my granddad when he died. And as I started to listen to him, I saw the old narrative drop away, and I listened. And in that space of listening and presence, he described to me his experience of being with my granddad when he passed. And it was a really deeply spiritual experience that he had. And I just saw my dad in a completely different way than I had previously. Just through letting go of that old narrative I'd had about him not being a spiritual person and not understanding and not being interested in those things. What comes into my mind as I'm saying that is Sydney Banks saying that there is no person who's more spiritual than another. We're all the same, and there's something so powerful about seeing the universal nature of that our own true nature is the same. Every person, however they manifest, however they show up to us, every single person shares that same true nature, and a facet of that nature is pure love. And there's incredible potential in that. And it's one of the things that's so powerful about this understanding, because it gives us a chance to settle down and have an experience of our true nature. And we experience more love. And the barriers fall down and the separation falls down, and we experience a oneness. And that's got so much hope in it, not just for us as individuals, but for the whole of humanity. And so it's really beautiful, Carolina and Wayne, to see you creating this amazing platform and giving so freely and giving people an opportunity to share in this lovely understanding. Yeah. So what about when we don't feel love? When we have all these thoughts going on that get in the way of us experiencing that? Well, Sydney Banks talks a lot, doesn't he, about love and understanding. And even when we don't feel the love, we can still have the understanding. We can still see as what I was talking about just now, about the universality of it. And we can know that whatever somebody else is showing up as for us, they're also just caught in their thinking. Maybe it's thinking about us. Now, we might not be able to do anything about that, but we can understand it. And we can have compassion for that. Yeah. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, that compassion will spontaneously arise. And sometimes with that comes forgiveness. Again, these facets of our true nature that are always there, but just temporarily obscured for us. Now, this Rumi quote, actually, it turns out when I started to look through my Rumi books, actually not to be by Rumi at all. It's very often attributed to him. But actually, you can actually find, I wanted to read it in context. I wanted to read the couplet in context to see what else I could learn, to see what else Rumi said about it. But actually it's in A Course of Miracles, which is a book that was channeled by Helen Schuckman, so it's her words. And when I went to the book, and again to read it in context, I found another beautiful quote which I'd just like to share with you, and it's this: "The greatest miracle is simply gaining a full awareness of love's presence in one's life." That really spoke to me. And it's pointing in exactly the same way that Sydney Banks does, pointing us to love's constant presence in our life. It's always there, never not there. And all we have to do is remember that that is literally our true nature. Love is such a central theme in people's lives. And often it's at the end of someone's life that gets brought into full context. But we don't have to wait till the end. We can wake up and realize that now. One of the things that the internet and mobile phones and text messaging has provided us with is examples of what happens when somebody thinks they're going to die. And one of my colleagues in the hospice where I volunteer has collected all these quotations of people where they've been on a plane that's about to crash, or they've been in some other life-threatening situation, and they've reached out thinking they're going to die, and sometimes they have, to their loved ones. And they say things like, "The plane is going to crash and I just really want you to know that I absolutely love you. Tell the kids I love them." And often when people come to the ends of their lives, they want to find an expression of that love. I do volunteer work in a hospice, and so often what becomes central to people is how they express their love and how they make meaning of their life through looking back at those experiences of love in their life. And that can take so many different forms. One beautiful woman, she was the mother of 2 children, and her expression of love at the end of her life was to cook a month's worth of food and fill her freezer, so that when she passed, her husband wouldn't have to think about feeding the children for a bit. Love is so central to human existence. And there's something so profound about understanding the principles and uncovering that for ourselves, uncovering our true nature. Sometimes I meet people in the course of my work who are alone. They don't have a spouse or children or very much family. Maybe they're entirely alone in the world. And yet what's profoundly beautiful is for them to uncover that actually love lies within. And love is essential. It's the essence of who we are. Sydney Banks talks about that in Second Chance. Well, actually, he talks about it in every single book he wrote. I'll just read to you from Second Chance what he says about love. He says, "True love is pure spirit power, manifest, The manifestation can take many forms. There's a mother loving her child, a doctor caring for his patient, a father playing with his children, a child playing with a new puppy, people caring for the less fortunate. Love is a positive feeling, and if people cultivate this feeling in their lives, they will surely free themselves from any unbalanced conditions that surround them. Love is not just an idea. Love is a living, breathing essence that the wise can pluck from the air at will and like a master artist, mould it into something beautiful. Love makes the impossible possible. Love is a word that we use to point to the essence of who we are. It's an act of remembrance. But there are other words that point to that too. And one of the other acts of recognition is the recognition of beauty. So it's not just about love we feel for another person or an animal, but it's recognizing the beauty in the world. And when we get quiet and our thinking gets still for a moment, we see more beauty in the world. Literally, when we recognize beauty, it's a reflection of who we are within. The love is within, the beauty is within. Everyone on this call will have had some moment where they have seen something profoundly beautiful, and it brings with it this beautiful feeling that's very, very similar to a feeling of love. Maybe it's a beautiful sunset that you've seen. Something in nature, a newborn baby. There's a place near my home in Cornwall that people go to watch the sunset. And it's a very quiet, out of the way place. But in the summer it can get quite busy. And there's something that I've noticed as people gather in this place, sometimes in groups or families, they can be really busy. You know, they're chatting away, they're having a beautiful holiday, the children are playing, people are scrolling through their phones, maybe they're setting up their camera to capture the sunset. And there comes a moment, often just before the sun slips into the sea, where everyone gets quiet and still. And there's this shared recognition of beauty. And as I'm looking in that direction now, that true nature emerges and expresses itself as love, as a feeling of love. And so often when I work with groups of people, I end up saying I love you all, and I mean it. And yeah, I don't know what else to add to that. Carolina, if there's something that you'd like me to share, or if anyone has any questions, or if anybody would like to share their own experience of experiencing and remembering their true nature and having that experience of love or recognizing beauty, that would be really lovely to hear that.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. And as you're saying, you are talking about the stillness of the sunset and pointing towards there, and I was looking at the group on the grid, and you probably saw the same. Like, I know people are muted, but you can feel that quietness. That if everybody was unmuted, we could probably hear this complete quiet that we have experienced being live with people, with you, and then we respect that because we know that's where the real juice is.
Yeah.
So it would be lovely to hear.
I think just before we do, I think for me, I love what you said about beauty, because when we started the first lockdown in March, and I've said this a few times, I remember looking out of the living room window one morning and everything was just so still. It was just still beautiful, and I just thought, wow, this is just beauty. This is just the world kind of paused, and even in that moment there's still beauty. Even in the midst of a pandemic, and the amount of weather that we had, the amount of really nice weather we had at that point, for me, I believe it was because everyone just stopped and the world just decided, right, okay, because you've stopped, here's some love from me.
That's beautiful, Wayne. And maybe what it allowed you to do is for your mind to settle down,
yeah,
and your personal thinking to just stop just for a moment.
Yeah.
Because whenever that happens, we see beauty everywhere.
Yeah.
We can't not, because it's literally who we are. It's literally the essence of who we are.
Let's see. So if you want to ask a question or share something, you can now unmute yourself, or just put your hand up in case you can't unmute yourself when you want to. Maggie is putting her hand up. So you may have to unmute yourself, Maggie, because of just because of the settings.
Okay.
There you are.
I think I've done that.
You've done it.
Yep.
Yeah, just I would like to just share something. An experience yesterday. I've been swimming in the sea since March last year. And I know it's kind of flavour of the month at the moment, but it has been, for me, just incredible. And yesterday, it was a nice day. We're on a sort of estuary in South Devon where you've got a river, lovely wooded banks, but you're looking out to the open sea. There's just my husband and I in the water, nobody else really around at all. I was comfortable in the water. You know, it was just absolutely incredible. And, you know, for that period of time, just everything fell away. There was just, you know, it was just purity, clarity, beauty. It was just absolutely extraordinary in a, you know, seemingly in some ways perhaps an alien environment, but to feel completely comfortable in the water. It was just really, really lovely.
That's beautiful, Maggie. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And so often it comes upon us when we least expect it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I love that you pointed out, it's now maybe the flavor of the month. Like before, I knew a few people that were, um, in the UK, it's not that common to go and, well, at least for me, to go and swim in open waters, like in other places in the world, because it's cold, and some places you need to know that it's safe. And but funny enough, when we were in lockdown, we were allowed to go out to exercise, and obviously, for people that like swimming, all the swimming pools were closed.
Mm-hmm.
So any contact to being in water, people started becoming more curious about, swimming in natural waters, which I guess that's what, as primates, as we started being, like us as part of the animal kingdom, probably is what we naturally will do. So it was like a natural call to go back to nature and get curious about it. And I think that is beautiful that you pointed out that yeah, it says that you get in that environment with your husband, and it's just you and nature, and unless you have thinking about being cold, I guess sounds like an ideal place to. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. There's something quite tempting though, isn't there, about when we have a beautiful experience like that, we attribute it again to something outside of us. We attribute it to being in nature, or doing a certain thing like swimming or walking in the woods or whatever it is. And if we're not careful, we can turn that into something that we do in order to get that nice feeling. But really what the principles points us towards is that feeling is there in us all the time. And it's when we drop out of the other thinking, the personal thinking, that we get to experience that. It isn't to do with something outside of us. I remember many times I've had a wonderful experience. It might be in the sea or something like that. And the temptation is to go and do that thing again to get that nice feeling. but it's never that. And it's incredible, the sort of situations in which, when you start to appreciate the value of a quiet mind, what you can, the circumstances in which you can have that feeling of clarity and connection and love and beauty. Even I don't know why this one's coming into my mind, but I had one experience where I was sitting on a bus, and a huge horsefly flew into where I was sitting. And it was one of these really ugly, bugly things, and it had a big stinger on the end of it. And normally I'd have been completely freaked out and, batted it away, or at least tried to, create some space between me and it. And yet in that moment, I was completely present and quiet, and I just fell in love with this fly. And it was perfectly fine for it to be in my space. There was space for both of us, and it was fine. So, there's no limit to the potential for us feeling that love for anything in creation.
So Susie.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
This is a strange one to bring up, really, but it keeps on coming up, so I thought I should say it. I was just remembering when I was with my father, actually, in hospital, and he was the last few weeks of bowel cancer, and it was the last few days, really, when heavily doped up on morphine and everything that they can find, really. And they got the dosage slightly wrong, and he sort of came round, and there was a lot of pain, and he was screaming, and there was drama, and he couldn't really express. But anyway, it was full on. And there was just a moment when I just felt such extreme love for him that went through everything. I just saw him so clearly for who he was. I just saw that pure essence inside him, still beneath all the drama and all the suppression and everything. And he was yelling at me to get something for him, and I just sat there in that complete stillness and was just looking at him, I know, with sort of such love, and he was looking at me like such pain, and there was just a moment where his eyes softened, and he just saw me for a second. He just saw me, and the world sort of stopped, and there was just that deep connection of just pure love, and everything else fell away, and I know. And for that split second, he wasn't in any pain, it just stopped. I could see that there was just such light in him, and there was that beauty, and it was okay. Everything was okay. Yeah. And then he disappeared again, and a few days later he was gone. He was lost to the painkillers and everything. But I always remember that, there was just that moment of deep, deep, deep connection, and nothing else mattered, and that's what's eternal.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Susie. It's really beautiful what you're describing there. Seeing the eternal. Yeah. And I love the way you described how it was, everything got quiet for you, and that allowed you to see it in him. And then just for that moment, he also joined you in that stillness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really beautiful example of what this understanding points us towards, this eternal nature, where everything is always okay.
Yeah. It's always there.
Yeah, always there. Thank you.
Oh. So feel free to unmute yourself or ask a question, share something. If you don't want to ask it yourself, you can always write it on the comments, and we'll ask that for you, or we'll share that for you. One of the things I remember so vividly and with such intensity was when you do one of the courses, and you start learning about the principles. In our case, it was the Inside Space, and it was with Carol and Ian. And I remember, as we were sharing before, it's like, well, I came to listen to Ian, but then Ian will say something that will maybe turn my world upside down so much that I started feeling that I didn't like him anymore. And then Carol will say something that I felt like she was in a way more caring, or having a more easy delivery. And then I will completely fall in love with Carol. And then Carol will say something that would say, well, but I invite you, Carolina, to look at that. And, I may have said something, for example, of, could have said something like, but when I'm in nature, I feel so, she will have said, something on the surface of yeah, but it comes from you, and stop me in my tracks of thinking that it would come from anywhere else. And then instantly I'll go either, oh my gosh, or again, I wouldn't like Carol for what she said, you see? So intensively during that course, I have these, oh my God, I love them. Oh my God, oh no, I don't like them anymore. Oh, I absolutely hate what they're saying and the way they're saying it. So during just the morning, I could have had several different feelings, and I think we sort of talk about this, and like where if I have believed that my thinking in the moment was telling me something about them, really, I wouldn't have finished the course and I wouldn't be here. And but it was incredible to see with what intensity it sort of changed, and then inevitably it will go back into love and connection.
I think there was one time on the Insight Space, there was one weekend that I was talking about the relationship that I got with my mum, and I remember for me I was getting a little bit kind of emotional about it, and I think Ian said something, and then Carol, you just came back with something, and the only way I can really describe what you came back with was, for me, it just kind of felt like you picked me up and just kind of was like, it's okay. And I remember, I can't remember who I was sitting with, but I think there was like a pack of tissues going around, and immediately I just got chucked a pack of tissues. I was just like, right, okay. But for me, it was always that. It was that. You always had that kind of. There was times where sometimes you just need that kind of, well, this is the way it is. But then there's the other times where it's kind of like good cop, bad cop. And then, but you did it in such a way that was just, it was what was needed at the time. And for me, I think that it's just one of those things that you can just, it's just love.
Yeah. And that what you're describing there is like a microcosm of our whole life, isn't it? How we just, this fluctuation of thought just gives us this multisensory experience that's constantly changing. We feel love and connection, we feel out of connection and out of love. And all of it's changing all the time, and it's all possible. And the beauty of this understanding is that when we really see that, it doesn't really matter as much at all what's happening out there, because we know where that love is really coming from. It's within each of us. It's beyond the outer form. It's those formless principles that Sydney Banks describes. Pure love. And it's not a mistake that we have these fluctuations of thought, that we develop these patterns of thought. It all has the same source. It's all working towards helping us uncover who we really are. To know love, we must know its nemesis. In the world of duality, there will always be opposites. what spiritual teachings point us towards is transcending that. Seeing more and more clearly that there is no separation, that there is just one love, and we are all it. And love and life will bring us, universal mind will bring us the people to show us that. And its opposite. But it's all moving towards an evolution in consciousness and an uncovering of that one love. Oneness and love is at the heart of every spiritual teaching. It's all pointing in the same direction. That's why many spiritual teachers are pointing towards an evolution of consciousness as being the key to changing what we see in the world of form, what's currently happening to humanity. And people like you guys are being part of that evolution of consciousness by sharing in the way that you do, by creating series like this and sharing your love with people around you. So thank you.
Thank you. I think Maggie wanted to say something else.
Maggie, I think you can unmute yourself. If not,
that's
yeah.
right, I think. Oh yeah, it's just the sort of the experience in the sea of just sort of utter bliss, kind of just the two of us sort of just in such a, I mean, did feel like a bit of a bubble of how can this, in a sense, how can this be so wonderful that, the water's supposedly cold and yet, we were just so comfortable in that spot of pure bliss. 12 hours later, and I'm in hell again because I can't sleep. And my sleep has been just really erratic for a lot of years. And it was just, such a contrast that it's 2-3 o'clock in the morning, waiting for it to get to sort of 4 or 5, thinking, well, I probably will go to sleep around 4 or 5. But it was extraordinary in a sense that, looking back now, I can see, well, what was your day like yesterday then? Well, it was absolutely fabulous, thanks. It was just beautiful. And yet within a short space of a few hours, I'm not in that, that is just the bitter watches of the night. And love is seemingly about as far away as it could possibly be.
That's it. And I think that's a very common experience for us, that we have these moments of bliss and then the personal thinking mind kicks in again and obscures that. But there's something hopeful in knowing that we're only ever one thought away from that place of bliss, because it's literally who we are.
Yeah.
We haven't really got to go anywhere to look for it. And for me, the deeper I've gone into this understanding and the more I've understood the role of thought and come to value the quiet mind, there's a natural learning that takes place. It's not something I do. It's not something that we can do. But the understanding that that place within us exists, naturally, we don't take ourselves away from it as often. Or we can navigate our way back to it with more ease. We put less in the way. I love Dick and Bettinger's metaphor for this. He says, when you realise that the headache you have is being caused by the great hammer you're hitting yourself with, You don't need to learn a technique or read a manual to learn how to drop the hammer. It's a natural, organic learning that takes place when we really understand, when we really see the role of our personal thought system. And there's something about the understanding of that that naturally over time settles us down. So we get to recognize our true nature more frequently. And even when we're lost in thought, even at 3 a.m. in the morning, there's still a remembrance there that actually, no, we are okay. Because love and peace and clarity and connection is literally who I am. The very essence. I love that word, essence. It's the essence of who we are as human beings. And we can't lose it. We just temporarily lose sight of it. Unfortunately, quite often at 3 a.m.
Thank you.
Susie.
Yes, Susie, go.
No, to put my hand up or do it on the. Yeah, can I just ask a question? Bit of help actually with one of my clients. Just so I'm a homeopath. I came to see you a few years ago, Carol. I remember to study Narayani remedies.
Yes, I
remember.
remember.
And I remember we spoke about 3 principles then because I just spent an evening with Ian, and I was like,
right.
And I remember just like chasing you into the kitchen and asking. But anyway, this is a homeopathy client, and she was badly sexually abused as a young child and all the way through, and much of which she'd forgotten. And so with homeopathy, it's coming up, it's surfacing, and she's remembering more and more. And I always remember you then actually saying you never mixed the two, homeopathy and 3 principles. I don't know if that's changed or not, but anyway, I've always had that in the back of my mind. So, but it can't help creeping in, nevertheless. It can't help it. And she keeps on asking about this, and we talk about how now, obviously, it's just a memory, and it's just thoughts, and how at the time she experienced it through thought. And she's very comfortable with that, and she's learning to be comfortable with whatever feelings come up because they can't hurt her and all of that. But at the same time, at the time, she obviously jumped out of her body like we all often do when you're in a state of shock. It's a natural reaction. And so she doesn't really want to see it as just thought in a way, because she feels that's disassociating with it in the same way. Do you see what I've been talking, and I can see can be a slight dichotomy or whatever the word is there, because it's not about disassociation, is it? It's about, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying. And 2 things are coming to my mind. Firstly, is for you to be clear in yourself what it is you're doing. What are you up to when you're with her? Are you following the homeopathic process? Or are you trying to teach her something about the principles? So first of all, it's what I have found helpful, and this is just my personal thing, is to just be very clear about what I'm doing. That doesn't mean to say that you can do it in the same session, but you just be clear yourself what you're up to. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
And then the other thing is about going back to really listening to what's going on and really listening to her vital force and trusting that. Because very often we can get the idea that, oh, it would be really helpful for her to see that the memories that are coming back for her and the feelings she's having are just thought. But actually, what her vital force might be doing, what universal mind, in the language of the principle, what universal mind might be bringing back these memories and these feelings for her to have an embodied experience of them and learn through that.
Yeah, it's exactly that. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, so maybe it's just trusting that and letting go of the idea that, oh, yeah, because we hear other people talk about, I have my own example of this. It was incredibly helpful for me when I saw that the traumatic flashback that I was having was my thinking, that I was re-traumatizing myself in this moment with stuff that just didn't exist anymore. The past just didn't exist. And why would I carry on doing that? It's that natural learning that takes place. And so we hear these stories and we can get an idea that, oh, that's what this person needs to hear.
Yeah.
But it might not be that.
Yeah, because the theme of her whole case is for her learning how to feel again.
There you go. So often these memories and things will come back when we're ready to deal with them, and when we can trust life, we can trust the vital force, we can trust universal mind to bring what we need to happen.
Yeah. So it's about helping her be comfortable in the moment with whatever's coming up, and knowing some stage it'll pass on.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Because it can so quickly get a bit cerebral, can't it?
That's right, and I think that's why it's helpful for us to check in and see if we're kind of up against something with a client. It's helpful for us to check in and think, well, what am I up to? Am I trying to direct this, even subconsciously? Am I trying to get this person to see something I've seen or something that I think will be helpful? And that's the time at which to perhaps step back more and allow more space and go back to listening and trust what comes up and the form it takes.
Yeah, it's back to holding the space, isn't it, as ever, really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And seeing the health in her, seeing the wisdom in her, in her body, mind, and whatever that chooses to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else got any questions or anything they'd like to share?
I like what Susie was saying, because what Maggie was also sharing. I have problems sleeping. I always had, since I was a child. And I thought, well, once I understand this, it will stop, I'll get better. Everything will get better. And 7-8 years in, knowing about the principles, and I gave myself for a long time a really hard time. So, well, there's obviously I'm not that good at this because I'm still having a lot of trouble sleeping. And there's been moments where it's got, in the past couple of years, there've been moments that it got particularly worse. And I have a great homeopath as well helping me, with Susie. And I took this experience is as well, something's going wrong. I'm going backwards. And I like what you're saying, Carol, because I started only recently to have a different relationship with my not sleeping at night. And I I don't like it, and I have a lot of thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing at night, that then I'm counting the hours of how many I will have if I fall asleep at when and then, and that I have to get up early and blah, 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 blah. So I can see that building up in my head, and how difficult it is for me to get quiet. So the world gets quiet, and it's like I can hear my thinking a lot more. It's like the mice, they just wake up and they're like, so, and I trust that just by seeing how I can trust life, and what you just said, I've just seen this. I can trust life, and I can trust that I would eventually sleep, whatever that time is, and I can trust that I can go around in my life, and the moments I can say to Wayne, look, please, I don't trust myself driving, and he comes and picks me up, and so Maggie, I don't know if this is helpful, but just that it's as magical maybe as the time in the water, though when we are in there we don't like it, when I'm in there and I can't sleep and I feel frustrated and I start having a lot of thinking, I start feeling the coldness in the water, and then I start fighting that feeling. I don't trust life in the same way that I trust it when I have the beautiful connection. And that's what I heard when you were talking, Carol.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, Carolina, because we're all going to get up against something at some point. Life, as Sydney Banks says, life is a contact sport. A principles understanding doesn't save us from stuff happening. But what has become more and more obvious to me is that it's when we get lost in our thoughts, when difficult stuff happens, that can often be life showing us something even deeper. Small things, big things, everything is a rich source of learning for us if we can just remember that we can trust life. So I love what you're saying there. It's beautiful. It's what I said earlier about even our personal thinking has the same source. Yeah. It's literally all universal mind. There are no mistakes.
So if there's anything else you would like to ask or share, or I don't know if you have something that you would like to share or ask.
I think for me, it's just that what you just said, Carol, was amazing. It's as soon as we kind of just let go and just be, life will just flow. And it's okay when it doesn't, it's okay if it doesn't.
That's it. Mm-hmm. It's been really, really beautiful to be with you guys, all of you, everyone on the call, and particularly you, Carolina and Wayne. Thank you so much for creating this experience and creating this space. It's very special.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. We were absolutely aching to have you in the series, and it's been absolutely beautiful. I got the missing link here, and I've been having this feeling of just opening the missing link. So if you don't mind, I'll read where a card is in it. So this is page 102 of the missing link from Sydney Banks. And it says, we must rid ourselves of yesterday's negative thoughts to receive today's new and positive feelings. I do not ask anyone to ignore their past experiences. This would be denial, and denial is not a healthy state. Instead, seek a clearer understanding of the past. Realize that the negative feelings and emotions from past traumatic experiences are no longer true. They're merely memories, a collection of old, stale thoughts. As surely as rust slowly destroys the strongest steel, hate and negative thoughts erode the soul of humanity. Negative thoughts are like scratches on a window. They stop you from seeing life with clarity. When the negative thoughts cease, the scratches disappear and the window becomes crystal clear. Then the beauty and positive aspects of life can be seen. The past is dead. Forget what is old and dead and start life anew.
Yeah, beautiful.
So thank you so much for being here, all of you. And next week we would like to invite you to our episode number 3 with Judith Sedgeman. And Judy, it's another wonderful teacher around the principles, one of these very strong women like Carol. She's been around the principles for like 30 years, and she's really amazing. She calls herself an educator of well-being and resiliency. And he's got a free training at the moment for veterans in the United States. She lives in Florida. She works, she volunteers for the Women's Institute, and she's really a fantastic teacher and mentor, and I think we all agree on that. So she's gonna talk about heal your heart, heal yourself, and find your heart.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Carol. Thank you for making the time for us. And thank you very much. If you have anything you want to comment or say or please send us a message. And Carol, before we go, where can people find you?
Okay, so my website's very simple. It's 3principles.co.uk, and you'll find all my contact details there. So drop me a line if you've got any questions.
We'll put it underneath the video, and we'll see you next week. So have a fantastic week, and thank you for being here. You can unmute yourselves and say goodbyes.
Bye.